well. Obviously, the previous weeks before that, of course, it was far from it, and people would maybe talk about the system and all that, Mark, but I suppose the players as well have to take a bit of responsibility in a sense, in both a positive way and a negative way. How can you go from being so poor to, sort of flicking a switch and being so good, and Man City couldn't live with them. Obviously the home fans as well at Old Trafford were shouting them on, but it was a brilliant performance and a brilliant result for them. But can they back it up today against the mighty Arsenal, who look like they're going to go sail away with this title?
There is, Jules, a natural kind of comparison to be done, I suppose, between Michael Carrick and Mikel Arteta, for the reason that United have obviously got quite a lot of criticism for going with the club legend again. Arsenal did it with Arteta and shown that it can work. And I know Manchester United fans won't like this, but are there things that Carrick can learn from the way Arteta approached it or not?
I guess the big difference is that Carrick is right now, certainly he might become permanent in the summer if he does a really good job between now and the end of the season. But when Mikel Arteta was appointed here in the December of that year, 6 years ago now, it was on the permanent deal. It was not an interim coach and saying like, prove us, show us that you can do it, and then we'll give you the full permanent job. For Carrick, this is it. It's an interim job. He might still be there in July. He might not be there in July. He might be looking for another club. Arteta didn't have that kind of period really, so it's a little bit different. But remember, Michael Carrick has already been an interim coach at Manchester United. He came here in 2021 and beat Mikel Arteta with United on the bench as an interim coach. So I think he knows. He knows.
Do you think that's significant?
Yeah, because I think that helped him massively last weekend.
Right.
I think if you take,
because it was only 3 games, wasn't it? But they were big games.
Yeah, but in the same way that I think you probably learned a lot then, and then we saw after that, especially with your beloved Middlesbrough, that there was a lot of positive things that he did. But more importantly, when you've done this kind of interim job already, and they're not easy jobs, I promise you, it's not as simple as just saying, boys, let's run a bit more, let's be a bit more intense, or going back to something a bit more simple than what Ruben Amorim used to do in a 4-2-3-1 with Bruno in his best position, with Mainu back in the team. That looks simple, and maybe there was a bit of that, but it was not just that. It's not easy to arrive like this, because there's also a lot of pressure on you, especially as a former United player. So I think his first experience, even if that was 5 years ago, would have helped him massively for this stretch of games between now and the end of the season.
Mark, do you think that time at Middlesbrough, in a job which is obviously far smaller than the Manchester United job, is that significant for him, do you think, in having done this? Because obviously you famously played under Gareth Southgate, who did go straight from dressing room to manager's office.
Yeah, I think the experience is invaluable. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Coaching at a level like at Middlesbrough, still a lot of pressure, a huge demand from the fans, the club expectation to deliver a certain style of football. I think having that experience has definitely done wonders. I don't think it's an experience that necessarily is going to help him overly with the Manchester United job, because that's a different beast altogether. I think, going on just from what Jules said there, taking over as an interim manager is very, very different to a permanent manager. You're coming in and almost picking the pieces up. You're coming in and lifting a dressing room. We see it so often, players bounce after a manager is let go. And I think Man United was a prime example of that. Those little details of changing a system, getting players in more comfortable positions, bringing players back in that have kind of a little bit of a point to prove, make all the difference. We saw Ruud van Nistelrooy when he was at Manchester United, same sort of thing, right? So I think having those people with that sort of level of, I think, respect from players automatically for the interim works really, really well. But obviously you can lose that very quickly if you're not able to put in the sessions, deliver the right sort of speeches and the right kind of tactical nous, that you can lose that really quickly. But I think so far he's shown
Do you think he is an interim, Mark? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think he is? Because he's not, he is the manager, isn't he, as opposed to...
When I say interim, he's interim until the end of the season, right? We know he's there until the end of the season. So, and the whole issue, or the whole discussions have been about putting a manager until the end of the season. And I think, yes, he is the Manchester United manager right now. That's no doubt about it. But is he the long-term prospect? Well, only time will tell. And I think so far he's got off to the perfect start. It's a massive job. It's a job that obviously he knows the club. He's been at the club. He's played under one of the best managers to ever managed in the Premier League. That goes without saying. He's able to bring back what so many ex-Manchester United players have been calling for, a Manchester United DNA. I'm not sure that's necessarily the right way forward, but certainly in terms of what it means to play for Manchester United and what the levels of expectations are of that club now and have been in the past, and try to get back to those levels, I think he's in the perfect one of the ideal people to bring that back, that mentality. But the game has evolved, so he needs to take it to another level.
My point about Carrick in a sense that why is there such a swell not to give him the job? You know, even before the Manchester derby, I was thinking, why is the message not from Old Trafford and the media? Jula might be able to answer this better than me, but why is it not? Doesn't matter what he does this season. We're not going back to an Ollie situation. Does well, give him a contract. Why is it not more support to say, Michael, you know this club inside out. Mark mentions the DNA. You know exactly how we want this club run, where it's going to be under the greatest manager of all time at this football club. Why is the messages and the noises not going, do you know what? You've got an opportunity here. If you do well, and this is before the Manchester, because people go, one game, you can't give him the job. I don't mean that. I was thinking before, why is the message so strong, Julian, from everyone in the media that this is only to the summer. It doesn't matter what he does. We're not doing an Ollie. But Michael's not Ollie. Michael's his own individual person. Why is there not a swell of support behind him rather than going, nah, it's different being interim. It's a totally different job. Why is that not the message?
It's a good question, Shay. I think there might be, although it was a different people running the club at the time, but remember what happened with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who started so well after Mourinho, brought a lot of positivity back to the club. People were smiling. The team was doing better. Then they gave him the job from a permanent deal 2 months later or 3 months later after they did well in the Champions League.
But you could say that. You could say it about bringing Mourinho, Van Gaal, all the superpowers management. You know, Ruben Amorim was regarded as one of the best managers in Europe. You know, why is there no support to say, let's give it to Carrick if he does well?
Support from who, though?
No, I think.
Well, I just think the media, they've said from day one he's not getting the job. Literally, he can do whatever he wants to. But
including ex-players, though, like Gary Neville said, it'd be the worst thing, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't think
United
it would be the
and
worst thing.
Carrick.
I think the message should be, if he does well, and get behind him and support him, and we'll do all we can as the powers that be. That because we've tried all the superpower names, the big names.
Yeah.
You know, but it's easy to go back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Julian. It's easy to say, oh, he done this and. But you could argue that when Ronaldo came to the club under Ole, maybe he didn't want them and couldn't press as much and all these different, different
but
things.
The different things was, Carrick can win today, for example, and have 2 great wins under his belt, and then wins again the next 2, 3, 4 games. I think the idea is let's not get carried away either. Let's don't even put too much pressure on him. Let him finish the season. See in May where they are in terms of table, top 5 maybe, Champions League next season, and then he will be very much part of the contenders for the job permanently in the summer, because in the summer they will appoint, whether it's him, Tuchel, Nagelsmann, whoever you want, he would be the guy who's going to take the job. The mistake with Solskjaer is that they didn't wait for the end of the season. They appointed him permanent job with a permanent job 2 months after they gave him the interim job. And I think with Carrick that was the idea. I really believe that they will take him very seriously as a contender for that job if he does well between now and May. But for now, they just didn't want to give him that job in 2 months' time, let's say, or in a month time if he wins 4 in a row.
I think the big question is, does Manchester United as a club know what they want? Because I don't think they've had that for some time. It seems like it's just been firing off the hip a lot of the times. It doesn't seem. I mean, they appointed a director of football, and then they headhunted him. They paid money to get him out of a club at Newcastle, and then they sacked him after a couple of months. There just seems to be a lack of I think clear identity of the club itself and what the club want and what they want to achieve and how they want to put a structure in place, other than we want success now. And I agree with what you're saying, Jules. I don't think the right approach is to put any more pressure on the manager right now. Michael Carrick, I think, look, the perfect start, wonderful result. Let's just see how it progresses and still explore all avenues. Come up with a plan. Come up with a long-term vision of how Manchester United should be run. Who should take control of the club. And I think that's really important. And don't make any rash decisions.
In the interest of kind of sort of splitting up Solskjaer and Carrick, as opposed to kind of comparing them, I wonder, Mark, and you're kind of uniquely positioned here because you were at Chelsea when Steve Holland was at Chelsea, that, and this is absolutely no criticism on Mike Phelan or whoever the kind of senior coaches were around Solskjaer, because obviously Carrick and McKenna were more junior, but do you think Steve Holland being there now with Michael Carrick is a big differential, is a big improvement?
Look, I think he's a great appointment. I think Michael Carrick's done a great job in bringing in Steve Holland. For probably the biggest reason for me is the know-how. The know-how. What are the expectations of an elite football club on a football level? What do the elite coaches expect? Winning coaches who win trophies, win leagues. What do they expect? What sort of demands do they put on players? What sort of level of players do you need to have to accomplish those sort of achievements? Steve Holland obviously spent a long time at Chelsea and has had some incredible managers he's worked under, has seen, observed, worked with, and I think that experience is invaluable, and it's more recent, and I think that's really key because the way the game has evolved. So I think his experience with England, dealing with players at the very, very elite level, is key. And I think he is a really good appointment for Manchester United at this moment in time with Michael Carrick.
What was he like around the place? I mean, I know it's different because this is pre-England, so he's probably grown and developed a lot, but still it's interesting.
Yeah, look, I was obviously under Jose Mourinho, and he brought in a lot of his coaching staff, and that can be quite overwhelming. Yeah, look, I was obviously under Jose Mourinho, and he brought in a lot of his coaching staff, and that can be quite overwhelming for anyone, really. But Steve Holland held his own, and he was not someone who was necessarily vocal because his role was I think a lesser role than what he would have today. However, whenever any of my experiences with him, engagements with him, he was very assured, very confident, and believed in his own ability, but also was someone who was respectful, and I think someone who had the respect of all the players around him.
He